They say every catamaran looks like paradise at anchor. Big cockpit, big fridge, big owner's cabin, sunset photos, drone shots. But live aboard for real, and the priorities change fast. Because the best liveaboard catamaran under 50 feet is not the one that looks biggest at the dock. It's the one that still works when it's loaded with water, fuel, tools, spare parts, solar, batteries, laundry, groceries, and the reality of living on it full time. And once you stop shopping with charter eyes and start thinking like a long-term cruiser, the filters get brutally simple. Structure, weight, bridge deck clearance, sail plan efficiency, systems autonomy, helm ergonomics, storage, maintenance access, resale. That's what actually decides whether a boat becomes a floating home or a floating regret. So this list is not about marina flex, it's about which liveaboard catamarans under 50 feet make the most sense when the honeymoon phase ends and the real ownership story begins. We're counting down the top 10 liveaboard catamarans under 50 feet.
Number 10. Lagoon 40. The Lagoon 40 is the entry point into serious liveaboard catamaran ownership, and that matters more than people think, because small in this category does not automatically mean compromised. Sometimes it means manageable. At 11.74 meters overall, with a beam of 6.76 meters, a draft of 1.35 meters, and a light displacement of 10,885 kilograms, the Lagoon 40 sits at the lower edge of this segment. But it still brings the same core design logic that made Lagoon dominant in the global market. Vacuum-infused construction, balsa coring above the waterline and in the deck, aft-stepped mast, self-tacking jib, centralized sail handling, and the one thing Lagoon understands better than almost anyone else, how to make a production catamaran feel friendly to non-expert owners. That is not a small advantage. A liveaboard boat that intimidates you every time you leave the anchorage is not a good liveaboard boat. The Lagoon 40's mast height of 18.42 meters also makes it ICW friendly, which is a huge operational advantage for cruisers who want flexibility on the U.S. East Coast. That opens up an entire inland migration route that many larger rigs simply can't use. Inside, the Lagoon 40 does something even more important. It feels bigger than it should. You get up to 2.01 meters of headroom in the cabins, which means taller sailors are not automatically miserable. And that alone makes it more realistic as a full-time home than many older 40-foot cats. But here's the catch, and this is the first liveaboard trap on the list. The Lagoon 40 is sensitive to overloading. That lighter 10.5-ton class displacement is great for keeping the boat manageable, but the moment owners start adding all the things real liveaboards always add, water maker, bigger batteries, solar arch, inverter, tools, spare anchors, dive gear, extra chain, maybe air conditioning, the margin starts disappearing fast. And once that happens, performance drops, motion gets worse, and the boat starts carrying weight it was never really excited to carry. So the Lagoon 40 makes this list because it's one of the most accessible real liveaboard cats under 50 feet. Not because it's the biggest, not because it's the most luxurious, but because for a couple that packs intelligently and wants a proven platform with strong resale, easy handling, and a giant support network, it's a very smart starting point. Number 9. Leopard 42. The Leopard 42 is what happens when a builder takes compact dimensions and refuses to make the boat feel entry-level. At 12.67 meters overall, 7.04 meters of beam, 1.40 meters of draft, and 12,467 kilograms light displacement, the Leopard 42 is still very much in the manageable liveaboard zone, but it feels more ambitious than that spec sheet suggests. Because Leopard's design philosophy is different from Lagoon's in one very important way. Leopard wants these boats to feel robust and ocean-ready first, not just easy to sell. You see it in the hull design, you see it in the layout, and you definitely see it in the sail plan. The Leopard 42 carries 113.1 square meters of sail area with an estimated sail area to displacement ratio of 21.0. That is a serious number in this segment. It means the boat is not relying purely on engines and accommodation volume to justify itself. It actually wants to sail. And the overlapping Genoa matters here. A lot of production cats moved hard towards self-tacking simplicity, which is great for maneuvering, but often leaves the boat under-canvassed in lighter air. The Leopard 42 avoids some of that weakness by staying powered up. So for the owner who still wants a liveaboard cat that moves with some authority, this is a big point in its favor. Then there's the bridge deck clearance. At around 0.75 meters, it's respectable for a boat of this size, and that matters because bridge deck comfort is one of the most underappreciated parts of real cruising life. People shop cabins, they shop cockpit cushions, they shop fridges. Then they go to sea and discover what pounding sounds like at 3 in the morning. The Leopard 42 gives you a better chance of avoiding that lesson. Inside, it also punches above its weight. Island beds, an upper lounge feel, a layout that feels more premium than compact. And then the Leopard's signature feature that matters more offshore than it looks in photos, the forward cockpit access and airflow logic that Leopard has built a reputation on. That airflow is not just comfort, it changes how livable the boat feels in hot climates. A boat that ventilates well is a boat people can actually live on. The downside is that Leopard historically has not been the bridge deck clearance champion of the category, and that brand legacy still follows them, even though newer designs have worked toward a better balance. But the Leopard 42 earns its place because it combines compact size with real sailing power, solid liveaboard usability, and a more ocean-oriented personality than many buyers expect from a production cat.
Number 8. Fountaine Pajot Elba 45. The Elba 45 is one of those boats that can fool you if you only evaluate it emotionally. Because emotionally, it looks elegant, refined, stylish, easy. But under that, there is real technical intent. At 13.45 meters overall, 7.55 meters beam, 1.20 meters draft, and 14,021 kilograms light displacement, the Elba 45 lives right in the middle of the liveaboard sweet spot. Enough size to feel like a home, not so much size that it becomes an operating burden. And this boat exists because Fountaine Pajot wanted to replace the Helia 44 with something more efficient. The result is a hull redesign that cuts drag by 10% through changes to the transom and aft chine. That matters because the boats in this range all promise lifestyle, but the better ones also remember that drag is the tax you pay forever. Every mile, every light air day, every motoring hour, every anchorage missed because the boat was too lazy to keep moving. The Elba 45's 119 square meters of sail area and estimated SA to D of 18.5 put it in a solid middle position. Not a hot rod, not underpowered, just balanced. And that word comes up again and again with the Elba. Balanced volume, balanced performance, balanced energy profile, balanced ownership risk. Even the sail handling shows that logic. The main sail halyard uses a 2-to-1 purchase, which makes a large sail more manageable for one person. That is exactly the kind of detail that matters on a liveaboard cat, because the real audience here is not a full crew. It's a couple, maybe a family, maybe an owner who is tired, sunburned, and dealing with squalls without extra hands. The Elba also benefits from Fountaine Pajot's broader solar and autonomy thinking. It is not the biggest energy monster on the list, but it sits in the class of boats that understand modern liveaboard life means renewable generation is not optional anymore. And interior-wise, the Elba is one of the better examples of a production cat that still feels like a cruising boat rather than a floating apartment with masks added later. It makes this list because it gets a lot right without screaming about any one thing, which is exactly why some buyers overlook it. But a lot of long-term happiness comes from boats with fewer extremes.
Number 7. Lagoon 42. This is where the list starts getting serious, because the Lagoon 42 is arguably one of the most balanced all-around liveaboard catamarans ever built in this size range, and that balance is hard to achieve. Too much focus on volume and the boat gets lazy and heavy. Too much focus on performance and everyday livability starts shrinking. Too much focus on charter layout efficiency and owner comfort disappears. The Lagoon 42 threads that line unusually well. At 13.22 meters overall, 7.68 meters beam,
1.26 meters draft, and 12,100 kilograms light displacement, it is physically large enough to feel like a real home, but still light enough to avoid the most obvious penalties of the bigger production cats. Its sail area is 94 square meters with an SA to D of 18.1. That's not explosive, but it's enough to keep the boat honest, and the real strength here is how the package works together. Lagoon's aft-stepped mast and ease of handling philosophy are in full effect. High-aspect rig, shorter, more manageable boom, self-tacking logic, lines led back to the helm. Everything about the boat says one thing: make short-handed sailing less stressful. And for liveaboards, that's huge, because boats that are technically manageable on paper often become psychologically tiring in real use. The Lagoon 42 avoids a lot of that. Then there's the improvement over the older generation. This model specifically addressed performance criticisms of the previous designs by bringing the bridgedeck to LOA ratio down to 1.52 to 1, which improved speed and reduced pounding. That is exactly the kind of engineering evolution you want to see, not styling for the sake of styling, not gimmicks, actual correction of known weaknesses. The design integration is also stronger than it first appears. The coach roof and bimini flow together in a way that creates a sheltered helm still connected to the cockpit. That sounds small until you spend real time sailing from that helm. Protection matters, visibility matters, feeling connected to the people on board matters, and Lagoon tends to understand that their customers are not chasing race boat purity. They want reduced stress. The 42 also wins on the ownership side. Lagoon has the biggest support network in the industry and one of the strongest resale markets, and that matters a lot more on a liveaboard boat than buyers admit, because one day the plan changes. People move ashore, people upgrade, people downsize, people sell because of life, not because of boats. And when that day comes, the Lagoon 42 is one of the safer places to have your money parked in this segment. Number 6. Nautitech 44 Open. This is the driver's boat, and it feels like one, because Mark Lombard designed it to keep behaving like a sailing machine even after it becomes someone's house. That is rare, really rare. At 13.30 meters overall, 7.36 meters beam, 1.45 meters draft, and just 10,900 kilograms light displacement, the Nautitech 44 Open is dramatically weight-conscious, compared with many other cats in this class. And that light displacement changes everything. The sail area is 106.1 square meters. The estimated SA to D is 22.2. That is the highest performance number on this list. Immediately, you understand what this boat is trying to be. Not a condo, not a charter block, a real sailing catamaran that just happens to be livable enough to cross oceans and stay on for years. Then you add the bridge deck clearance, 80 centimeters. That is exceptional. And if you understand what bridge deck clearance means offshore, you understand why that one number makes the Nautitech 44 Open stand out. Less slamming, less pounding, less structural vibration, less psychological wear on the crew. That is not glamour. That is long-term livability. And it gets even more interesting at the helm. Twin aft helms, mechanical cable steering, direct rudder feel. This is not a filtered, isolated, apartment-style sailing experience. This is feedback. You feel the boat, you feel trim changes, you feel pressure, you feel the difference between sailing the boat and simply directing it. For a real sailor, that is addictive. But for liveaboard analysis, the better question is whether that purity costs you somewhere else. And yes, it does. The helms are exposed in bad weather. Visibility of the opposite bow during docking is more complicated. This is not the easiest system for every owner. It is the most sailing-focused system, and that distinction matters. But Nautitech compensates in other ways. Foam core construction instead of balsa, lower risk of water absorption and biological degradation, better structural longevity in humid tropical environments, less decorative fluff inside, more emphasis on usable weight and responsive behavior. And then the liveaboard masterstroke, the smart room, a flexible space that can be used as a workshop, laundry, or technical storage room. That sounds boring until you've lived on a boat. Then it sounds genius, because one of the biggest liveaboard pain points is not the bedroom, It's where all the ugly real-life stuff goes. Tools, parts, laundry, filters, spare pumps, electrical gear. Cruising life is built on ugly equipment, and the Nautitech gives it a place to exist. That's why it ranks this high. It's not the easiest boat. It's not the most apartment-like boat.
It's the best pure sailor's liveaboard cat under 50 feet. Number 5. Bali 4.6. The Bali 4.6 is the most radical lifestyle boat in this class, and depending on what you want from liveaboard life, that either makes it brilliant or completely wrong. Because the Bali 4.6 is not trying to win the same game as the Nautitech, it's trying to redefine the game. At 14.28 meters overall, 7.66 meters beam, 1.22 meters draft, and 13,260 kilograms light displacement, with a loaded displacement that climbs dramatically higher, the Bali 4.6 is built around one obsession: usable living space. And no boat on this list weaponizes that idea harder. The entire Bali identity revolves around the open space concept. Aft bulkhead, gone. Tilting garage door lifting up into the coach roof. Single-level interior and cockpit flow. Roughly 95 square meters of flush living area. That is insane for a 46-foot catamaran. The effect is not subtle. It feels more like a floating loft than a production multi-hull. And for many liveaboards, especially families or owners who spend huge amounts of time at anchor, that changes daily life in a massive way. Then the foredeck, no trampoline, solid foredeck structure. That matters because trampolines are often the first component to fail on cats over time, and Bali basically deletes the problem by changing the architecture. Again, that is not a tiny detail, that is a full design philosophy. Inside, the provisioning story is even more aggressive. The Bali 4.6 leads the class with a 615-liter household-style refrigerator and integrated ice maker. That is liveaboard gold. Because provisioning is not a romantic concept after 6 months aboard, it is logistics. Cold storage means autonomy. Autonomy means fewer marina stops. Fewer marina stops means cheaper cruising and more freedom. The Bali also carries 800 liters of fuel and 800 liters of water, which reinforces the same point. This boat is optimized for staying out. Now, the trade-off, and it's a real one. The Bali 4.6 carries 151 square meters of sail area, but its estimated SA to D is only 15.8. Why? Because weight wins, or in this case, loses. The loaded boat can approach nearly 20 tons, which makes light air performance more sluggish than that huge sail plan initially suggests. So this is not the boat for someone obsessed with sailing feel. It is the boat for someone who wants the most convincing floating home experience under 50 feet. And one more thing matters: PVC foam core. That puts it in the more water-resistant camp versus the balsa cord majority. For long-term tropical ownership, that matters. The Bali 4.6 ranks this high because no other boat under 50 feet feels this much like a luxury apartment at sea while still offering real cruising capacity.
Number 4. Leopard 45. The Leopard 45 is the proven ocean crosser on this list. Not the most experimental, not the newest idea, not the most radical, but one of the most validated. At 13.72 meters overall, 7.36 meters beam, 1.50 meters draft, and 14,900 kilograms light displacement, the Leopard 45 hits a very convincing middle ground between strength, volume, and passage-making credibility. This is a boat with hundreds of circumnavigations to its credit, and that matters more than brochure theory. Because once enough real boats have gone enough real miles, the design starts getting graded by reality instead of optimism. The sail plan is strong, 123 square meters of sail area, estimated SA to D of 20.2, robust rigging, Bluewater focus. This is a catamaran that still respects the idea that sailing performance matters offshore, especially when the boat is loaded and real weather arrives. And then there's the feature that defines Leopard more than anything else, the forward cockpit door. This is one of those details that initially looks like a marketing differentiator. Then you use it and you realize it changes daily life. Airflow through the saloon and owner's suite is better. Movement around the boat is better. Visibility and access forward are better. At anchor in warm climates, it can be the difference between comfortable and miserable. At sea, it's also a safer and more protected transition route than forcing every movement around the outside decks. The engine rooms also deserve attention. They sit aft of the accommodation, which reduces odors in the living spaces and significantly cuts noise levels in the cabins. That sounds simple. It is not simple. Bad engine placement can make a boat feel cheap every single day you own it. Good isolation makes the entire liveaboard experience feel calmer and more premium. The Leopard 45 is not perfect. Some owners have reported vertical hull cracks in certain units tied to manufacturing defects in fiberglass layup that required serious repairs. That matters, and it should not be ignored. But what keeps the Leopard 45 high on this list is that the core boat itself is so convincing. The concept is right. The layout is right, the sailing profile is right, the ventilation is right, and the reputation for Bluewater ability is strong enough that it remains one of the most trusted production liveaboard cats in the world.
Number 3. Lagoon 46. Now we enter the volume monsters. And the Lagoon 46 is one of the biggest reasons Lagoon dominates this market, because this boat understands exactly what most liveaboard buyers are secretly trying to buy. Space, confidence, range, resale. At 14.50 meters overall, 7.96 meters beam, 1.37 meters draft, and 16,300 kilograms light displacement, the Lagoon 46 is undeniably a large catamaran for this class, and it looks like one, it feels like one, it lives like one. Massive hull chines create more storage and more interior beam. That translates directly into the one thing long-term cruisers eventually crave more than almost anything else: room for their stuff. And on a liveaboard cat, storage is not luxury, it's survival of domestic order. If everything has nowhere to go, the boat slowly becomes unlivable. The Lagoon 46 avoids that better than most. Then there's range. Fuel capacity is 1,040 liters. That is enormous in this segment, and that one number completely changes the operational story. Long motoring range means flexibility in weather windows, safety margins in calms, and less dependence on marina fuel schedules in remote cruising grounds. Water capacity is 600 liters. Estimated refrigeration volume is around 350 liters. Estimated solar potential, around 1,000 watts. This is a boat built to support real autonomy. The owner's layout is also a major reason the 46 sells so well. Double island berth aft, central lounge area, huge head forward in the owner's hull. It feels like an apartment suite, and for couples doing full-time life aboard, that comfort premium matters. But this boat ranks third, not first, because the size comes with penalties. The flybridge is a social hub, yes, but it also adds weight and windage. In stronger conditions, the boat can feel top-heavy. And like many larger production cats optimized around volume, it is not the sharpest sailing tool in the shed. The estimated SA to D of about 19.5 is respectable, but this is still a comfort-first machine. There is also the shadow of the older Lagoon 450, which had documented bulkhead delamination and warping under rigging tension. Lagoon responded by reinforcing bonding and using finite element analysis on the 46 for greater safety factor, and that matters. It shows a builder learning from real-world failures instead of pretending they never happened. The Lagoon 46 is top 3 because for a risk-averse owner who wants the biggest mainstream support network, giant living volume, major tankage, and one of the safest resale positions in the market, it is one of the strongest all-around ownership plays under 50 feet.
Number 2. Leopard 46. This is the technological pivot boat. The Leopard 46 is where conventional liveaboard cat design starts blending into the next generation of off-grid cruising, and that alone makes it one of the most important boats in this entire category. At 14.50 meters overall, 7.40 meters beam, 1.52 meters draft, and 17,656 kilograms light displacement, it is a serious cruising platform. The sail plan is Series 2, 140.5 square meters. Estimated SA to D of 21.1. Optional Ullman performance sails. That is a very strong number for a boat this substantial, and it tells you Leopard did not want to lose the sailing DNA of the earlier 45 while moving into a greener systems philosophy. And that systems philosophy is the story. The optional hybrid electric drive uses twin 25-kilowatt electric pods paired with two separate 27-kilowatt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery banks, backed up by a 24-kilowatt range-expending generator. That architecture matters because it is not just about novelty, it is about redundancy and energy logic. Separate battery banks improve resilience. Lithium iron phosphate brings safer, more stable chemistry. Hydro regeneration while sailing allows the spinning propellers to charge the batteries underway. That means the Leopard 46 is one of the few boats here that can realistically approach a net zero style energy loop on passage under the right conditions. That is a huge shift in what liveaboard autonomy can look like. Solar capacity up to 1,600 watts reinforces the same point. This is a boat designed for owners who want to reduce noise, reduce diesel dependence, and move toward a more self-sufficient operating model. And crucially, it doesn't do that by becoming a weak sailing platform. That is what makes it special. Interior-wise, it builds on Leopard's strengths: improved hull windows, good ventilation logic, ocean-ready brand identity, a layout that still feels practical, not theatrical. The engine and machinery story is also strong in both standard and hybrid thinking. The Leopard 46 is basically a statement that liveaboard catamarans no longer need to choose between modern energy systems and real cruising credibility. So, why is it number 2 and not number 1? Because number 1 is the boat that best solves the whole liveaboard equation for the broadest range of owners. The Leopard 46 is arguably the more futuristic boat, but the number 1 boat is the more complete liveaboard package right now.
Number 1. Fountaine Pajot Tanna 47. The Tanna 47 is the most complete modern liveaboard catamaran under 50 feet. Not because it dominates every category, because it has the fewest meaningful weaknesses. And for long-term ownership, that usually wins. At 13.94 meters overall, 7.70 meters beam, 1.20 meters draft, and 14,700 kilograms light displacement, the Tanna 47 lands in a remarkably sweet zone. Big enough to feel substantial, not so bloated that the boat becomes purely about volume. Efficient enough to keep moving, advanced enough to support modern off-grid life, and organized enough to be run by a small crew. Its sail area is 129 square meters, with an estimated SA to D of 19.1. That gives it a healthy performance profile without turning the boat into a demanding handful. The rig uses a high-cut jib and a roachy main, and Fountaine Pajot's hull and bow design keep drag under control. The result is a boat that still behaves like a sailing machine instead of surrendering entirely to condo logic. But the real reason the Tanna 47 takes number 1 is energy autonomy. Up to 1,700 watts of flexible solar integrated directly into the cabin top roof. That is class-leading, and for a liveaboard, that matters as much as almost anything on the boat, because energy is life aboard now. Refrigeration, electronics, computers, water systems, lighting, ventilation, possibly electric cooking, maybe even air conditioning strategy. If the boat cannot support that ecosystem efficiently, the owner pays for it forever in generator hours, maintenance, fuel, noise, and frustration. The Tanna 47 is one of the few boats here that feels like it was designed around the reality that power generation is now central to the liveaboard experience. Water capacity is 700 liters, fuel capacity is 940 liters, estimated refrigeration around 400 liters. That is a real cruising inventory. And then the interior architecture keeps up. The galley is commercial grade in feeling, U-shaped, secure at sea, more than 300 liters of refrigeration in the galley concept itself. This is not a decorative cooking corner for charter guests making coffee. This is a real working galley for people provisioning hard and cooking underway.
The helm redesign is another reason it wins. Fountaine Pajot split the helm area into a steering zone and a separate line handling zone. That improves safety in maneuvers because it reduces the chaos that happens when one place is trying to be every place at once. This matters more the bigger the boat gets. And layout flexibility matters too. Quintet version for large families, Maestro version for private owners. That means the Tanna 47 can adapt to different liveaboard missions without losing its core competence.
It is also widely regarded as one of Fountaine Pajot's best designed models to date, and that reputation exists because the boat combines style with genuinely smart cruising decisions. That combination is rare. A lot of beautiful boats are annoying to own. A lot of practical boats feel dated from day one. The Tanna 47 escapes both traps. So it gets number one because it solves the modern liveaboard puzzle better than anything else under 50 feet. It sails well enough, lives well enough, powers itself better than almost anything else, handles short-handed more intelligently than most, and keeps the whole package coherent.
Now, before you lock in your favorite and start typing angry comments, here's the part that actually matters. Why these boats made the list, and why liveaboard cat shopping goes wrong so often. First, construction philosophy. Most of the mainstream builders here, Lagoon, Leopard, Fountaine Pajot, still rely on balsa coring above the waterline and in the deck. That gives high compressive strength and good cost control, but it puts a maintenance burden on the owner. Because if fittings are not kept watertight, moisture ingress becomes the long-term enemy. Bali and Nautitech go the other direction, with closed-cell PVC foam cores like Divinicell. That means better resistance to water absorption and biological degradation, which is a major advantage in humid tropical cruising. So the core material question is not abstract. It changes long-term ownership risk. Second, bridge deck clearance. This is the metric buyers ignore until the boat starts teaching them about noise and impact. Low clearance means more slamming when sailing into head seas. More slamming means more fatigue, more structural vibration, and a much uglier offshore experience. Nautitech stands out here with 80 centimeters of clearance on the 44 Open. That is one of the reasons it feels so ocean competent. If you only compare interior photos, you miss one of the most important comfort variables at sea. Third, the sail plan divide. Lagoon helped normalize the aft-stepped mast, shorter boom, and self-tacking jib setup. That is brilliant for ease of handling, but it can leave the boat feeling under-canvassed in light air unless you add a Code Zero or Gennaker. Leopard keeps more power in the base configuration. Nautitech pushes performance hardest. Bali carries lots of sail on paper but gets dragged back by displacement. So when people say a cat sails well, the better question is relative to what weight, in what wind, with what rig logic, and with how much gear on board, because liveaboards always carry more than brochure boats. Fourth, energy autonomy. This category has changed massively. Old-school cruising assumed diesel solved everything. Modern liveaboard life assumes the opposite. The better boats now are the ones that generate meaningful renewable power and support larger battery ecosystems. That's why the Tanna 47 and Leopard 46 rank so high. They are not just boats, they are energy platforms. Fifth, the interior deception. A bigger interior is not always a better liveaboard boat. Sometimes it is just a heavier boat with more furniture. The best liveaboard interiors solve real problems: secure galley at sea, ventilation, storage, technical access, noise isolation, flexible utility space. That's why the Nautitech Smart Room matters.
Why the Bali refrigerator matters. Why Leopard's airflow matters. Why Lagoon's storage matters. Why engine placement matters. Liveaboard comfort is not one giant owner's suite. It is the total friction of daily life. And finally, resale. This part is always ignored during the dream phase and rediscovered during the exit phase. Lagoon has the strongest resale market because of scale and recognition. Leopard holds value well, especially in the US and Caribbean, because buyers trust the brand's ocean cruising reputation. Bali's resale market is still maturing. Nautitech appeals strongly to sailors, but to a narrower audience. Fountaine Pajot sits in a very attractive middle lane, combining style, efficiency, and increasingly strong off-grid appeal. So if your mission is pure sailing feel, the Nautitech 44 Open is the standout. If your mission is maximum floating home lifestyle, the Bali 4.6 is basically in a category of its own. If your mission is proven Bluewater production cat reliability, the Leopard 45 is still one of the most validated choices on Earth. If your mission is giant mainstream support, volume, and resale stability, the Lagoon 42 and Lagoon 46 are hard to argue against. If your mission is future-facing off-grid cruising with hybrid potential, the Leopard 46 is the most important leap on the board. And if your mission is to own the most complete overall modern liveaboard cat under 50 feet, the Fountaine Pajot Tanna 47 is the boat to beat. Because that's the truth about liveaboard catamarans. The best one is not the one that wins a marina tour. It's the one that still makes sense after a year aboard, after a squall at anchor, after a rough passage, after the batteries matter, after the storage matters, after the engine access matters, after the noise matters, after the boat stops being a fantasy and starts being your actual address. And in that real-world test, these 10 are the boats that stand out, not because they promise the dream, because they're the most likely to keep working after the dream becomes daily life.